What if I told you that in a single, quiet ceremony behind the gilded walls of the palace, a single decision was made that would shake the very foundations of the royal family, leaving one of the most famous women in the world in tears? Imagine this. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, someone who has navigated the unforgiving glare of public scrutiny and the ruthless corridors of royal protocol, suddenly confronted with a reality she could never have anticipated. A reality where the title she had long coveted, a symbol of prestige, influence, and recognition, was handed not to her, but to her fiercest rival, Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge. And the one orchestrating this seismic moment? None other than Princess and the Queen's daughter, a woman known for her unwavering principles, icy discipline, and unshakable dedication to duty. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You might be thinking, titles are just names, ceremonial gestures, mere pomp. But in the world of royalty, titles are power. They are history. They are legacy. And in that room, as the palace's ornate chandeliers bathed the hall in a soft golden light, history was being rewritten, alliances were being tested, and emotions ran far deeper than the cameras could ever capture. Now, hold on to that image for a moment. Close your eyes and picture Meghan, thousands of miles away in California, hearing whispers of the ceremony. The news trickles in through aides, through distant calls, through a network of loyalists and courtiers who have always been in her corner, or so she believed. The whispers grow into full sentences, and then the message hits. The title, the one that could have cemented her place, her relevance, her influence within the monarchy, has been transferred to Catherine. Why does this matter? Because in the world of the royals, perception is reality. Public image is everything. And nothing stings more than watching someone else, someone you consider your rival, receive recognition that you feel was meant for you. Meghan's tears were not just about disappointment. They were about the realization that no matter how much influence, charm, or public support she amassed, there are forces, traditions, and alliances that simply cannot be bent to personal will. But let's step back for a moment. Princess Anne is not a woman who gives away her power lightly. Her loyalty to the crown is legendary. She is the epitome of old-world discipline, a woman who has spent decades quietly ensuring that the monarchy operates smoothly, that duty prevails over ego. When Anne decides to act, it is calculated, deliberate, intentional. And in this case, her decision was to elevate Catherine, a woman who, by all appearances, embodies the very essence of the monarchy: grace, humility, strategic intelligence, and quiet strength. And Catherine, for her part, was taken aback. She knew the weight of the moment, the significance of the gesture, but nothing could have prepared her for the responsibility she was about to shoulder. A title of this magnitude is not just ceremonial. It carries with it centuries of tradition, expectations, and scrutiny. Suddenly, Catherine found herself standing at the intersection of history and destiny, receiving a symbol that could redefine her legacy within the monarchy. Meanwhile, Meghan's world began to crumble. From her Californian estate, where she had built a life ostensibly free from the stifling rules of the British royal family, she was reminded that the reach of tradition, protocol, and legacy is long, stretching across oceans and decades. Every move she had made, every public appearance, every statement of autonomy suddenly seemed insignificant against the quiet, deliberate power of Anne's gesture. And yet, Meghan could not simply walk away. She had invested too much, risked too much, and in her mind, deserved far more. Consider the symbolism here. A title is more than a word. It is an emblem of authority, a mark of recognition, a tangible token of approval from the monarchy itself. And to hand it to Catherine in a surprise ceremony was not just an act of promotion. It was a statement. It was a declaration that Catherine had earned her place, that service and duty matter more than ambition and public spectacle. And it was a quiet, almost invisible rebuke of Meghan, whose pursuit of recognition had been more performative than principled. But what makes this story even more compelling is the timing. The world has been watching Meghan and Harry, following their every move, dissecting their every decision. The public narrative has painted Meghan as a victim of the palace, as a woman trapped by tradition, as someone misunderstood. And yet, here was evidence to the contrary. a private, deliberate act that challenged that narrative, showing that influence is not given based on celebrity, charm, or outrage. It is earned through patience, strategy, and unwavering commitment to duty. And so, as the ceremony unfolded in London, and as the news made its way across the Atlantic, emotions surged. Catherine, composed and regal, understood the gravity of her new role. Princess, and calculating and precise, knew she had made the right decision. And Meghan, confronted with the consequences of her actions and the limits of her power, was left grappling with a reality she could neither control nor reverse. But this story does not end there. Because behind closed doors, there were whispers, leaks, and private conversations that revealed a far deeper layer of intrigue. Friends and confidants began to speak, advisors leaked private memos, and the network of influence within the monarchy began to shift. And as we peel back each layer, the true magnitude of Anne's decision and its impact on Meghan becomes increasingly clear. Consider this. What would you do if, after years of striving, after pouring your heart and soul into a pursuit, you discovered that someone else, someone you had considered your equal, had been quietly chosen over you? How would you react? Would you storm the palace gates? Or would you retreat, nursing your bitterness in silence? Meghan's reaction, as we will uncover, was a mixture of heartbreak, fury, and determination. And it set in motion a chain of events that no one, not even the royal family, could have predicted. There are moments in history where a single gesture, a single act, defines the course of events for decades. Princess Anne's decision was one of them. The transfer of the title to Catherine was not just ceremonial. It was strategic, emotional, and laden with meaning. It revealed alliances, exposed vulnerabilities, and showcased the enduring power of tradition in the face of modern celebrity culture. And yet, amidst all of this, there are questions that linger. How did Meghan truly feel in that moment? What conversations took place behind closed doors, away from public scrutiny? Did she attempt to intervene, to plead, to negotiate? And perhaps most importantly, what does this tell us about the unspoken rules of the monarchy, the invisible threads of loyalty, and the cost of ambition in a world where every gesture carries weight beyond comprehension? As you watch this story unfold, keep one thing in mind. Every tear, every gesture, every whispered conversation is part of a larger narrative. A narrative about power, legacy, envy, and the human emotions that shape decisions at the very highest levels. And the truth, as we will reveal, is far more complex, more emotional, and more dramatic than any headline or public statement could ever convey. But the most shocking part, the part that no one saw coming, was yet to be revealed. Because while the world was focused on the glittering ceremony, the cameras, and the public faces of the duchesses, there were secrets, intentions, and silent machinations unfolding in the shadows. Secrets that would ultimately redefine the relationships, reputations, and roles of Meghan, Catherine, and Princess Anne in ways no one could have predicted. And it all began with that moment. That quiet, deliberate act by Princess Anne. The handover of a title that carried with it centuries of history. The tearful realization for Meghan. And the dawning understanding for Catherine that her role in the monarchy had just changed forever. What happened in the minutes, hours, and days that followed would expose fissures, trigger emotional storms, and reveal truths that have been carefully hidden for decades. It would challenge loyalties, test relationships, and redefine what it means to serve, to aspire, and to belong in one of the most scrutinized institutions in the world. And the question that lingers now, the question that this video seeks to answer, is this: how will Meghan respond? How will this shift in power, recognition, and legacy alter the trajectory of her life, her influence, and her position within the global conversation about royalty? The answers are shocking, emotional, and deeply revealing. And what comes next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Did anyone truly anticipate how one quiet ceremony could send shockwaves across the monarchy? One moment, a room filled with polished faces, crystal chandeliers, and a hushed reverence. The next, whispers of disbelief and tension echoed across oceans, reaching a Californian estate thousands of miles away. The question now wasn't about who would attend the ceremony. Everyone knew the key players, but what it would mean for the women at its center. What would this act, this deliberate handover, due to Meghan's world? And more importantly, how would Catherine react when the weight of centuries landed squarely on her shoulders? The palace that day was immaculate, as it always is, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation that even the most seasoned staff could feel. Courtiers, aides, and officials, all long trained in the art of discretion, whispered in corners, casting furtive glances at one another. There was something different in the air, a tension that could not be ignored. Princess and herself entered the hall, her posture rigid, every step calculated. Her eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Catherine, who stood composed, calm, but inwardly quaking with the gravity of the moment she was about to inherit. And then there was Meghan. Though she was physically absent, her presence was felt everywhere. Through whispers, leaked messages, and the unrelenting reach of social media, the story of the ceremony had already begun to filter across continents. Imagine knowing that an event so pivotal to your aspirations, your very desire for recognition, was happening without you, and that you were on the outside, powerless to intervene. It's the kind of realization that tightens the chest, makes the hands tremble, and brings tears to the eyes of even the most seasoned public figures. Inside the hall, Catherine took her place in front of Princess and, the moment almost surreal in its simplicity. There were no dramatic fanfares, no speeches of grandiose length. Just the quiet precision of Anne's movements, the measured cadence of a woman who had spent decades perfecting protocol, and the symbolic act itself. And reached out, carefully adjusting the insignia that had been meticulously polished for the occasion. Every movement deliberate, every gesture calculated to convey honor, responsibility, and expectation. Catherine felt the weight immediately. It wasn't just the physical heft of the title's insignia. It was the centuries of history, duty, and expectation now resting on her shoulders. A title like this is not given lightly. It carries with it the responsibilities of tradition, the gaze of the public, and the scrutiny of a family whose every interaction is dissected worldwide. Catherine's eyes briefly met Anne's, a silent acknowledgement of the enormity of what had just occurred. And in that gaze, a conversation passed without words, a message of trust, expectation, and the understanding that history would now watch her every move. Meanwhile, Meghan, far away, was learning about the ceremony in fragments. Leaks, rumors, and informal calls from insiders painted a picture she could hardly bear. The tears didn't come immediately. First came disbelief. Then came a burning sense of frustration, a quiet anger that simmered beneath the surface. Imagine building a life, a brand, and a public persona with the world watching, only to have a pivotal opportunity, a symbol of legacy and influence, handed to someone else. How would you react? Would you scream, retreat, plot your next move? Meghan did a little of each, though in ways the public would never see, for now. What's crucial to understand about this moment is the context behind Anne's choice. This was not about favoritism or popularity. Princess Anne has always been a guardian of tradition, a woman who prizes duty over sentiment, service over spectacle. Her choice to transfer the title to Catherine was strategic, symbolic, and, in many ways, a deliberate message. Catherine represented continuity, steadfastness, and quiet leadership, the traits and values above all else. Meghan, for all her charm and global presence, was perceived as disruptive to the delicate balance and works tirelessly to maintain. There were also subtle, almost imperceptible cues throughout the ceremony. The way Anne positioned Catherine closer to the center of the room. The way her eyes lingered on Catherine with approval. The way Meghan's name was mentioned only indirectly in private conversations afterwards. Every detail was deliberate. Nothing about this was accidental. And in the world of royalty, nothing is ever just ceremonial. Every gesture carries meaning. For those watching from the outside, the ceremony might have seemed simple, even mundane. But for the participants, every heartbeat mattered. Every whisper, every glance, every subtle shift in posture told a story. The weight of history pressed down, and Catherine felt it immediately. She understood that she was now a symbol, a figure whose actions and choices would be compared to Meghan's for years to come. She also realized that Anne had just delivered a subtle rebuke to Meghan without ever speaking to her directly, a move both elegant and devastating. And the ripple effects didn't stop there. Word of the ceremony quickly made its way to social media, to the tabloids, and to royal commentators around the globe. Analysts dissected every frame, every expression, and every gesture. Did Catherine's smile betray nerves or triumph? Was Anne's nod one of approval or warning? And Meghan, watching and waiting, could only speculate, adding to the storm brewing within her. But here's what makes this moment even more remarkable. The ceremony itself was deceptively simple. There was no grand fanfare, no media spectacle, just a quiet act in a polished hall. And yet, it carried the weight of decades of royal politics, ambition, and carefully guarded tradition. The contrast could not have been more stark. Catherine's quiet dignity versus Meghan's distant, simmering turmoil. Anne's deliberate calm versus Meghan's unpredictable energy. Every observer, whether inside the palace or on the other side of the Atlantic, understood that this was a pivotal moment, one that would be dissected for years to come. And then came the small details that would haunt Meghan later. The whispers about what Anne had said to Catherine in private, words meant for no ears but those in the room. The subtle references to duty, to honor, to legacy, every sentence layered with meaning, every pause deliberate. Catherine absorbed it all, understanding not just the gift, but the message. This title is more than a name. It is a responsibility, and it is not yours to demand, it is earned. As the ceremony concluded, Catherine stepped back, adjusting to the sudden weight of expectation. She had assumed a title that carried centuries of legacy, a mantle of influence that would define her trajectory within the monarchy. The room remained silent for a moment, the gravity of the event settling over everyone present. Anne's eyes lingered on Catherine one last time, a look that was part acknowledgement, part challenge. And then, as the hall returned to normalcy, the world outside remained oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just occurred. Meanwhile, Meghan's reaction was anything but quiet. Reports suggest that tears flowed freely, anger simmered just beneath the surface, and desperate calls were made to friends, advisors, and perhaps even media allies. Imagine the frustration of seeing someone else, someone you have watched closely, achieve what you have long desired, and realizing that no amount of charm, influence, or protest could alter the outcome. What would you do if you were in her position? Would you try to fight it? Or would you retreat and reassess your strategy? Meghan's choices in the aftermath would reveal much about her character, her resilience, and her ambitions. But perhaps the most important question of all is this: how will this moment define the relationships between these three women moving forward? Princess Anne has sent a message that is both clear and unyielding. Catherine has accepted a mantle that will shape her public persona for decades. And Meghan is left to grapple with disappointment, envy, and the realization that influence in the monarchy is not granted lightly. As the world looks on, fascinated and curious, the consequences of this ceremony are only beginning to unfold. The tension between tradition and modernity, between duty and ambition, has been laid bare. And while the glittering exterior of the palace masks much, the internal storm is very real. Every gesture, every whispered conversation, every calculated decision has set the stage for a drama that promises to redefine the narrative surrounding Meghan, Catherine, and Princess Anne. And just when you think the story has reached its peak, when the world believes it has seen the full impact of Anne's decisive move, the first leaks begin to emerge. Insider reports, private messages, and subtle hints on social media suggest that what occurred in that hall was only the beginning. There are conversations that have never been heard, reactions that have never been seen, and strategies being developed behind closed doors. Meghan, in her tearful state, begins to plot her response. And what comes next will change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever wondered what it really means to hold a title that carries the weight of a millennium? One that stretches back through centuries of history, through wars, alliances, betrayals, and the quiet, invisible decisions of monarchs long gone. That is exactly what Catherine inherited that day, a title far more powerful and symbolic than most could ever imagine. And Meghan, for all her ambition and charm, could only watch as the legacy slipped further from her grasp. The title itself was not merely decorative. It had been held by generations of royals who shaped the very foundations of Britain, influencing policy, diplomacy, and the intricate workings of the monarchy behind the scenes. For Princess Anne, this title represented more than honor. It was a symbol of continuity, a testament to the responsibilities and sacrifices of royal service. Every recipient of this title carried a burden to act with discretion, to uphold the traditions, and to serve the crown with unwavering loyalty. When Anne approached Catherine with the insignia in hand, she was not merely performing a ceremonial gesture. She was passing down centuries of expectation, a living testament to the monarchy's enduring strength. The hall was silent, yet every eye present could feel the gravity of the moment. Imagine standing there, knowing that history itself is watching you, that the choices you make from this point forward will be scrutinized and compared to those who came before. For Catherine, the realization must have been both humbling and exhilarating. Consider what this meant for Meghan. She had spent years cultivating her image, projecting confidence, and asserting her influence. Yet this moment revealed an unalterable truth. In the monarchy, influence is not determined by ambition alone. It is determined by service, by patience, and by a deep understanding of tradition. And here, Catherine, quiet, steadfast, and composed, had embodied those very qualities. Meghan's tears, her frustration, her disbelief, all stemmed from the stark realization that legacy cannot be bought, demanded, or performed. It must be earned. The ceremony itself was rich in symbolism. Anne's gestures were deliberate, precise. Each movement, each word, carried meaning. Catherine's posture, her measured smile, her acknowledgement of Anne's guidance, all of it signaled a deep understanding of her new responsibilities. Meanwhile, Meghan, thousands of miles away, absorbed this unfolding drama in fragments. Leaked images, whispers from insiders, and the persistent hum of media speculation. She could not control it. She could not influence it. And the distance only magnified her feelings of helplessness. This title had the power to shape public perception. Catherine now held a mantle that would redefine her standing within the monarchy. The public would view her differently. Allies within the royal family would recalibrate their loyalties. And Meghan, ever conscious of her image and influence, understood that she had been sidelined. Every move she had made, every public speech, every media appearance, every carefully calculated statement, suddenly seemed insufficient. She had underestimated the subtle but unyielding influence of Anne's judgment. Historically, this title was associated with wisdom, responsibility, and discretion. Its holders were expected to act as intermediaries, as advisors, and as quiet influencers of policy and tradition, and had spent decades perfecting the art of wielding this power with subtlety, never seeking attention, always ensuring that the crown's authority remained intact. By passing it to Catherine, she was signaling trust, approval, and a recognition that Catherine had demonstrated the qualities necessary to uphold this ancient legacy. The symbolism did not end there. Every gesture, every glance, every whispered comment in the ceremony was laden with meaning. Anne's eyes lingered on Catherine with approval, a silent acknowledgement of her capabilities. Catherine's acceptance of the insignia, her quiet nod, reflected her understanding of the responsibility now entrusted to her. And Meghan, for all her ambition, could only watch and feel the sting of exclusion. It was a lesson in the permanence of tradition, a reminder that the monarchy operates on principles far older than any individual desire or public opinion. It's important to note that titles like this are rarely about power in the conventional sense. They are about influence, perception, and continuity. The holder becomes a living symbol, a conduit for centuries of royal authority. Catherine, by accepting this title, was not only stepping into a historical role, she was committing to a life of service, visibility, and scrutiny. Meghan's absence from the ceremony underscored the reality that influence cannot be performed for the camera. It must be demonstrated consistently, quietly, and with integrity. And yet, the emotional weight of this moment cannot be overstated. Catherine's calm exterior belied the significance of what she had just received. The expectations would be immediate and unrelenting. Every public engagement, every private conversation, every decision she made would be measured against the legacy of those who held the title before her. And Meghan's reaction, the tears, the shock, the frustration, revealed the emotional cost of ambition when it clashes with tradition. There were also subtle strategic elements at play. And, in choosing Catherine, was sending a message not just to Meghan but to the entire royal family. She was signaling that service, duty, and discretion were paramount. She was reminding everyone that titles are earned, not demanded. And she was reinforcing the principle that the monarchy's strength lies in continuity, not spectacle. Meanwhile, the public perception was beginning to take shape. Social media buzzed with speculation, leaks from insiders hinted at behind-the-scenes tensions, and royal commentators dissected every frame of the ceremony. Catherine's poise and precision and Meghan's absence became the focal points of a story that would dominate headlines and conversations for weeks. And yet, despite the clarity of the moment, questions remained. How would Meghan respond in the coming days? Would she attempt to challenge the decision, to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers? Or would she retreat, regroup, and plot her next move? The dynamics within the royal family had shifted subtly but irrevocably, and the ripples of this ceremony would be felt long after the chandeliers were dimmed and the guests had departed. What makes this moment extraordinary is that it was more than just a title transfer. It was a lesson in power, influence, and the enduring significance of tradition. Catherine had inherited a legacy, yes, but she had also inherited the responsibility of living up to centuries of expectation. Meghan, meanwhile, was left grappling with a painful truth. In the monarchy, desire alone is never enough. Recognition is earned, carefully and quietly, and sometimes, no amount of visibility or ambition can alter centuries-old rules. And while the ceremony itself had concluded in an elegant, measured fashion, the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Private conversations, strategic decisions, and subtle manipulations were already in motion. Meghan's reaction, Catherine's adjustment to her new role, and Anne's calculated positioning would all converge to set the stage for a series of events that no one could have predicted. So, as Catherine adjusted to the weight of the title, and Meghan struggled with the reality of being sidelined, one question loomed over everyone involved. What comes next when ambition meets tradition, when personal desire clashes with centuries of protocol, and when influence cannot be claimed but must be earned? The answer is as dramatic as it is inevitable, and it would leave both women forever changed. And just when it seemed that the story had reached its first peak, whispers began to emerge of private remarks, of hidden messages, and of subtle challenges yet to come. Catherine had accepted her new role and had delivered her silent message, and Meghan was left to contemplate her next move, a move that could alter everything. But what came next would ignite tensions, expose hidden fractures, and reveal secrets no one could have anticipated. Have you ever seen someone so determined to claim their place that they refuse to acknowledge the rules of the game they are playing? That was Meghan Markle in the months leading up to the ceremony, an intense mix of charm, ambition, and, at times, unrelenting desperation. While Catherine was quietly preparing for her expanded role, learning the nuances of protocol, and earning trust through measured actions, Meghan was navigating a different world altogether, one fueled by public perception, media influence, and a relentless desire for recognition. Her obsession with royal validation was well known among those close to the family. From the moment she entered the monarchy, Meghan had understood the stakes. Titles, appearances, and honors were more than symbolic. They were currency, markers of influence, and the keys to solidifying one's place in a centuries-old institution. But unlike Catherine, whose approach was grounded in patience and understanding of tradition, Meghan's strategy often leaned toward the dramatic. It was performative at times, theatrical at others, a reflection of a woman used to commanding attention, accustomed to a world where influence was earned through visibility rather than through adherence to protocol. From private diaries and insider accounts that have surfaced over time, we know that Meghan would often spend hours contemplating her public image. Meetings with aides were frequently framed around strategy, optics, and messaging. Every appearance at a charity, every speech, and even informal interactions were calculated to reinforce the image she wanted to project: modern, compassionate, influential, indispensable. Yet, in the halls of the palace, where tradition and discretion hold supreme authority, such maneuvers could be interpreted differently. A misstep, a gesture too bold, a comment overheard in the wrong circle, all could have ramifications that Meghan seemed only beginning to understand. Do you know what it's like to desire something so intensely that every fiber of your being is consumed by it? For Meghan, the coveted title represented more than just a ceremonial honor. It symbolized acceptance, influence, and legitimacy within a world that is notoriously unforgiving to outsiders. The crown's subtle nod, the acknowledgement by senior royals, was the ultimate validation she sought, and yet, as we have seen, it remained just out of reach. Her obsession manifested in countless ways. Private conversations reveal that she frequently referenced the title, the recognition, and the respect it would bring. In staff briefings, she would subtly steer discussions toward legacy projects, hoping to showcase initiative and strategic thinking. Her appearances were often carefully timed to coincide with major announcements, royal engagements, or charitable campaigns, all designed to draw attention to her commitment, her capabilities, and, ultimately, her worthiness of recognition. But while she focused on optics, she underestimated the enduring power of tradition, the subtle dynamics of the inner royal circle, and the quiet judgment of those who understand the monarchy in ways the public never could. Even before the ceremony, Meghan had reportedly made discreet inquiries about the potential transfer of the title. She asked aides to probe, subtly hinting at her suitability and readiness. But these inquiries were either blocked, redirected, or dismissed by those who understood that influence in the monarchy is not self-declared. You can broadcast your achievements, cultivate global admiration, and leverage every media outlet available. But when it comes to centuries-old traditions, the decision-makers remain few, and their criteria remain unyielding. The irony is palpable. Meghan's skill at commanding attention, a quality that served her well in Hollywood, was now almost a liability in the palace. Where she expected acknowledgement, she encountered restraint. Where she anticipated deference, she encountered protocol. And while the public admired her confidence and presence, the private world of the monarchy measured her against standards that are invisible to the casual observer but enforced with unerring consistency behind closed doors. Insider accounts suggest that Meghan's frustration grew as the ceremony approached. She began to oscillate between calculated optimism and moments of private despair. The title she coveted, a symbol of continuity, authority, and respect, had become an obsession. She imagined scenarios where she would finally be recognized, where her contributions and public persona would earn her the approval she longed for. Yet, as the day drew nearer, the realization that this might never happen began to weigh heavily. And then there was Catherine. Catherine's approach was diametrically opposed to Meghan's. While Meghan pursued visibility and recognition, Catherine embodied consistency and quiet competence. She understood the importance of relationships, of timing, and of subtle influence. Her every action, whether public or private, reinforced her suitability for legacy roles within the monarchy. And notice this, and it is precisely why she chose to pass the title to Catherine, not Meghan. But Meghan's obsession wasn't limited to the palace walls. Far away in California, she monitored every leak, every rumor, every news article with painstaking attention. She tracked public perception with the precision of a strategist. Every post on social media, every headline, every comment could potentially validate her worth or amplify her frustration. And as whispers of the ceremony began to circulate, the emotional tension within her reached a crescendo. Tears, frustration, and anger combined with a fierce sense of injustice. How could Catherine, a rival she had once considered an ally of sorts, receive what she had so long desired? How could Anne, a figure she may have hoped to impress, hand the title to someone else without even acknowledging her efforts? You might ask yourself, in a world where so much is public, where media scrutiny is relentless, and where global attention is constant, how does one process this type of emotional blow? For Meghan, it was complex. Part indignation, part heartbreak, and part strategic calculation. She knew the optics of a public meltdown would be disastrous. But privately, she struggled with the raw sting of exclusion. She was learning, perhaps painfully, that the monarchy does not reward visibility alone. It rewards patience, service, and alignment with long-established norms. This obsession also created tension with Harry. Sources indicate that while he understood and empathized with her feelings, he was acutely aware of the delicate balance required to navigate these moments. The couple had built a life together that bridged celebrity and royalty, but moments like these reminded them both that the monarchy's inner workings often operate on principles far removed from public perception. Harry's own frustration with the institution may have mirrored Meghan's, but he recognized the need for careful navigation, a lesson Meghan would have to absorb, whether she liked it or not. And yet, despite the frustration, despite the tears, and despite the growing realization that the title would not be hers, Meghan could not stop thinking about what she might have done differently. Could she have approached him privately? Could she have demonstrated her dedication in a way that aligned with tradition? Could she have anticipated the subtle dynamics that favor patience over performance? These questions haunted her, creating a tension that would shape her next moves that were already being plotted, with allies quietly consulted, media strategies considered, and a public narrative carefully curated even as she seethed privately. As the day of the ceremony approached, the contrast between Meghan's obsession and Catherine's quiet preparation became more pronounced. One woman approached her role with patience, humility, and a deep understanding of tradition. The other approached it with urgency, ambition, and a desire for immediate recognition. Both women were immensely capable, yet only one would be rewarded in the manner that mattered most within the royal hierarchy. And so, when the ceremony finally occurred, when placed the insignia in Catherine's hands, the outcome was inevitable. Catherine assumed a mantle she had quietly earned. Meghan, in California, was left to confront the painful reality that her obsession had not translated into the recognition she craved. It was a lesson in the unyielding nature of tradition, the subtle calculus of influence, and the emotional cost of ambition when it meets an institution built to endure centuries. But this was only the beginning. Because while Meghan's tears, frustration, and private calculations were already underway, the reactions of the palace, the public, and her closest advisors had yet to fully manifest. The title had changed hands, but the ripple effects, the emotional, strategic, and personal consequences, were only beginning to unfold. And what comes next would reveal truths about Meghan, Catherine, and Princess and that no one could have predicted, shaking the very perception of who holds power in the monarchy and who can truly claim it. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be in a battle you can't openly see? A war fought not with swords or guns, but with protocol, glances, whispers, and the quiet precision of centuries-old tradition? That's exactly the war Princess and had been waging with Meghan Markle long before the ceremonial transfer of the prestigious title. And unlike the public conflicts we saw splashed across tabloids, this one was invisible, insidious, and ruthlessly strategic. Princess and is the embodiment of royal discipline. She doesn't yell, she doesn't storm out of rooms, and she certainly doesn't make grand public statements. Her power lies in her precision, in her ability to influence without spectacle, and in her unwavering adherence to the rules that have governed the monarchy for centuries. And Meghan, for all her charisma and ambition, often clashed with those rules, challenging not just tradition, but its deeply held sense of order and propriety. This silent war wasn't something that could be quantified in headlines. It was a series of calculated moves, subtle rejections, and careful monitoring of behavior. Insider accounts reveal that from Meghan's early days as a royal, and observed her closely. Every speech, every public appearance, every interaction with staff was under scrutiny. Where Meghan sought visibility and valued discretion. Where Meghan leaned into performance and favored substance. This clash of styles was more than personality. It was a fundamental conflict between two visions of what it means to serve in the monarchy. And silent disapproval often manifested in small, but telling ways. Courtiers report that during joint engagements, and would position herself in ways that minimized Meghan's presence or subtly redirected attention. Protocols that Meghan thought were optional were enforced rigorously when she was present. Invitations to private gatherings or strategic meetings were occasionally delayed or withheld. And perhaps most importantly, and maintained an aura of quiet authority that made it clear, while Meghan may have celebrity, influence, or public admiration, she did not yet hold the unspoken respect of the monarchy's inner circle. Why is this significant? Because in the royal world, perception and subtlety carry as much weight as formal authority. A glance, a pause, or a carefully chosen word can signify approval or disapproval with consequences that echo far beyond the palace walls. And Anne, a master of these subtleties, used them with surgical precision. Meghan, unaware at times, was often the recipient of this quiet scrutiny, feeling its impact emotionally even if she couldn't fully articulate it. And strategy was not malicious, it was defensive. She saw patterns in Meghan's behavior that threatened the careful balance of tradition and modern influence within the monarchy. While Meghan championed progressive causes and drew global attention, and understood that the monarchy cannot operate on popularity alone. It relies on continuity, discretion, and the respect of those who uphold it behind the scenes. In Anne's view, Meghan's approach, ambitious, public, and often confrontational, risked destabilizing the delicate equilibrium that generations of royals had maintained. But Meghan was far from passive. She recognized, on some level, the tension. She sensed the subtle exclusions, the measured corrections, and the occasional pointed remarks. And rather than stepping back, she intensified her efforts to prove herself. This was not a public spectacle. It was a quiet, intense campaign of visibility, influence, and strategic action. Meghan believed that demonstrating her dedication through achievements, initiatives, and global impact would force recognition. Yet she underestimated Anne's mastery of the unspoken rules, the idea that approval is not simply granted because one works hard or achieves public acclaim. There were incidents that insiders describe as turning points in this silent war. At a private charitable event, Meghan presented a well-prepared speech, brimming with passion and vision. And listened, polite but stoic, offering measured nods but withholding praise. The subtle tension was palpable. The room felt charged, as though the air itself was watching Meghan struggle for acknowledgement. Later, in corridors away from public view, and reportedly gave candid advice to other staff, quietly pointing out where Meghan's approach diverged from accepted norms. And then there were the staff dynamics. Meghan's teams often clashed with palace aides who had long served and, navigating decades of tradition and protocol. Where Meghan sought innovation and modernization, Anne's aides prioritized adherence to time-tested practices. The result was friction, small misunderstandings, whispered criticisms, and growing frustration on both sides. But all of this, in Anne's mind, was necessary to protect the integrity of the monarchy. This silent war also included messaging and optics. Anne's public appearances were carefully crafted, reinforcing her values of service, dedication, and humility. Meghan's appearances, while media-savvy, were designed to highlight personality, visibility, and influence. The contrast could not have been starker, and Anne's subtle critiques, delivered without confrontation, were designed to underscore this difference. By the time the title transfer ceremony occurred, Anne's position was unshakable. Catherine embodied the qualities she valued most, while Meghan's ambition, however genuine, had yet to align with the traditions of the crown. You might wonder, did Anne ever directly confront Meghan? Not in public, not openly. That is not her style. Her approach was strategic, relying on observation, quiet correction, and calculated gestures. The ceremonial transfer of the title, then, was the culmination of years of subtle positioning, a final, public acknowledgement of her preference, and a clear demonstration of her authority. For Meghan, the realization was devastating. It was not just the loss of a coveted title. It was the acknowledgement that her approach, her public influence, and even her global admiration could not override the silent mechanisms of royal power. Tears, frustration, and private anguish followed. And yet, Meghan's determination remained. She would not be overlooked, ignored, or sidelined. She would find a way to assert influence. But this time, she faced an adversary who was patient, disciplined, and unrelenting. Even Harry, who had supported Meghan throughout, reportedly felt the tension acutely. He recognized Anne's strength in strategic thinking, but also understood Meghan's frustration. The silent war was not just personal. It reflected the broader struggle between traditional royal expectations and modern celebrity influence. And as this story unfolds, the consequences of this clash, both emotional and political, become increasingly clear. And Silent War with Meghan is a reminder that influence in the monarchy is earned in ways that the public rarely sees. Public approval, media presence, and global recognition are not enough. Discretion, respect for tradition, and the ability to navigate centuries of unspoken rules are what ultimately determine who rises and who is sidelined. Meghan's tears, her frustration, and her obsession with recognition were the emotional price of underestimating these rules. But the silent war was far from over. Meghan's reactions, strategic recalculations, and emotional responses were beginning to shape her next moves. Allies would be consulted, media narratives crafted, and private conversations orchestrated. And all the while, and remained steady, patient, and unyielding, her actions calculated with the precision of decades of experience. So, what happens when ambition meets unbending tradition? When desire clashes with centuries of protocol? The answer, as we are about to see, is a drama that is both subtle and devastating, one that will challenge loyalties, expose vulnerabilities, and reveal truths about Meghan, Catherine, and Princess and that no one expected. And just when it seemed that the dynamics of this silent war were settled, a new development would surface, one that would escalate tensions to a level even and might not have anticipated. What came next would redefine the contours of this quiet, strategic conflict, and it would leave Meghan facing a reckoning that she could neither avoid nor fully control. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to rise quietly, steadily, and with a kind of invisible force, even as chaos swirls around them? That was Catherine in the months leading up to and following the ceremony. Calm, poised, and entirely unshaken, even as Meghan's world, filled with ambition and volatility, seemed to spiral. While Meghan navigated her obsession with recognition, Catherine was steadily building her influence, cultivating trust, and quietly earning a reputation that would ultimately secure her place at the heart of the monarchy. Catherine's rise was not sudden, nor was it driven by drama or spectacle. It was deliberate, patient, and deeply strategic. Her every public appearance, whether at a charitable event, a royal engagement, or a private meeting, reflected a careful balance of warmth, elegance, and competence. She understood the weight of tradition, the subtle dynamics of royal influence, and the importance of demonstrating reliability and humility. In a world where appearances are everything, Catherine's composure became her greatest asset. Insiders note that Anne's admiration for Catherine was not earned overnight. It was built through years of observation. Catherine consistently demonstrated qualities Anne valued most: discretion, loyalty, dedication, and the ability to navigate complex situations without drawing unnecessary attention to herself. These traits stood in sharp contrast to Meghan's high-profile approach, which, while charismatic, often challenged the established norms and threatened the delicate balance of palace life. While Meghan's focus was on visibility and immediate recognition, Catherine's strategy was slower, subtler, and ultimately more effective. She invested in relationships, understanding that influence within the monarchy is as much about alliances and trust as it is about titles and public perception. She cultivated quiet connections with advisors, courtiers, and staff, earning their respect without overtly asserting herself. She listened, observed, and acted with a patience that Anne found invaluable. And then there was the public side of her rise. Catherine's appearances were carefully choreographed yet natural, reinforcing her image as both a modern figure and a traditional royal. She excelled at balancing warmth with authority, charm with competence. Every smile, gesture, and word was measured to convey confidence without arrogance, grace without pretense. This approach not only earned her public admiration, but also demonstrated to senior royals that she could carry the weight of responsibility with dignity. Amid all this, Meghan's obsession with the coveted title created a stark contrast. While Catherine embodied calm competence, Meghan's ambition was more visible, more urgent, and more fraught with emotional tension. She wanted acknowledgement, influence, and legacy. And the palace, with Anne's subtle guidance, demonstrated that such recognition could not be demanded but had to be earned. The contrast between the two women became increasingly apparent, highlighting the different approaches to power, service, and perception within the royal family. And, ever the master strategist, understood this dynamic. She recognized Catherine's steady rise as a stabilizing force, someone who could bridge the old and new, who could carry the monarchy forward without disrupting its delicate balance. And by choosing to transfer the prestigious title to Catherine, she was not merely rewarding competence. She was sending a message about what qualities are truly valued in the monarchy: patience, discretion, and the ability to lead without spectacle. For Catherine, the title was both an honor and a responsibility. It was a recognition of her dedication, a validation of her careful approach, and a call to action. With it came the expectation to uphold centuries of tradition, to serve as a role model, and to navigate the complexities of public and private life with grace. Catherine understood the magnitude of what she had received, and she approached it with a seriousness that reflected her awareness of history, legacy, and duty. And while Catherine's rise was steady and measured, Meghan's world was increasingly chaotic. Reports from aides, insiders, and media outlets indicate that Meghan's frustration and tears were compounded by the realization that influence could not simply be performed or demanded. Every public appearance, every statement, every strategic move seemed insufficient in the face of Anne's deliberate decisions and Catherine's quiet competence. Meghan was learning, perhaps painfully, that visibility alone does not equal power within an institution that prizes tradition, discretion, and earned trust. The contrast between Catherine's rise and Meghan's frustration also played out in the media. Public perception, often sympathetic to Meghan's struggles, began to shift subtly as Catherine's composure and growing influence became more apparent. Analysts noted her ability to remain graceful under scrutiny, to communicate effectively, and to embody the values that Anne and other senior royals prioritized. Meanwhile, Meghan's emotional responses, although understandable, were increasingly viewed through the lens of volatility and ambition, traits that, while compelling to the public, did not always translate into lasting influence within the monarchy. Catherine's rise amid chaos was also strategic. She understood that patience and consistency could be more powerful than immediate recognition or dramatic gestures. By consistently demonstrating competence, reliability, and empathy, she gradually solidified her standing among senior royals and advisors alike. Her approach reflected a deep understanding of how influence is cultivated over time, through quiet but effective actions rather than public displays of ambition. And yet, even as Catherine's influence grew, Meghan's reactions continued to shape the unfolding drama. Her frustration, tears, and private calculations created ripple effects that extended beyond her immediate circle. Allies and advisors were drawn into her orbit, media narratives were crafted, and subtle challenges to the status quo emerged. Meghan's determination to assert influence, despite being sidelined, added a layer of tension and unpredictability to the royal dynamics, one that Catherine had to navigate carefully. It was in this context that the title transfer ceremony became more than a symbolic act. It became a turning point. Catherine's rise was validated in a public, undeniable way, while Meghan was forced to confront the reality that her ambition alone was insufficient. The silent war that Anne had waged against Meghan now had a tangible outcome, and the contrast between the two women's approaches to influence, service, and recognition could not have been more stark. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of Catherine's rise is the way it illustrates the power of patience, strategy, and quiet competence. While Meghan pursued recognition and visibility, Catherine built influence that was subtle, enduring, and deeply respected. She earned trust without spectacle, demonstrated leadership without drama, and embodied the values that the monarchy holds most dear. And as the palace, the media, and the public processed the implications of the ceremony, one question loomed large. How would Meghan respond to Catherine's undeniable rise? Would she attempt to reclaim the recognition she believed was hers? Or would she be forced to recalibrate, to find new ways to assert influence without directly challenging the established order? The answers were not yet clear, but the stage was set for dramatic confrontations, strategic moves, and emotional reckonings that would continue to unfold in ways no one could predict. Just when it seemed that the dynamics between Catherine and Meghan were settling into a predictable pattern, an unexpected event occurred. A private conversation, a subtle leak, a shift in the palace's internal dynamics that would escalate tensions and force both women to confront the reality of their positions. What came next would reveal the fragility of alliances, the depth of ambition, and the unpredictable consequences of a world where influence is earned quietly, and recognition can arrive in a moment, reshaping everything in its wake. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie in letters never sent, messages intercepted, or plans quietly derailed? For Meghan Markle, one such letter would become a symbol of lost opportunity, a moment that could have altered the course of her influence within the monarchy, if only it had reached its intended destination. This was not a casual note or a simple request. It was a carefully crafted plea, a declaration of intent, and, in Meghan's mind, a strategic move to secure the recognition she believed she had earned. And yet, as history would show, it never made it to the Queen. The story begins months before the ceremonial transfer of the prestigious title. Meghan, aware of the delicate timing and the importance of perception, had drafted a letter addressed directly to Queen Elizabeth, outlining her contributions, her dedication to charitable causes, and her vision for the future of her role within the monarchy. She emphasized her commitment to service, her understanding of royal expectations, and, most importantly, her desire to be recognized with a title that reflected both her accomplishments and her ambitions. It was, by all accounts, meticulously prepared. Meghan worked late nights with her advisors, carefully choosing each word, anticipating objections, and crafting a narrative that would appeal to the Queen's sense of fairness, tradition, and duty. The letter was more than a request. It was an argument, a case for legitimacy within a system that she had long struggled to navigate. She hoped that by presenting herself in such a measured and thorough way, she could finally gain the acknowledgement that had eluded her for so long. But the palace is not a simple institution. Protocol, discretion, and centuries of precedent govern not just ceremonies but the flow of communication. According to insiders, the letter never reached its intended recipient because it was intercepted, delayed, or redirected by those responsible for managing the Queen's correspondence. Whether due to oversight, intentional prevention, or bureaucratic gatekeeping, the result was the same. Meghan's carefully constructed appeal never made it to the eyes of the sovereign herself. The emotional impact of this interception cannot be overstated. Imagine pouring your heart, your strategy, and your ambition into a document meant to secure your place, only to have it vanish into the shadows of protocol. Meghan, learning of the letter's disappearance through indirect sources, felt a combination of frustration, betrayal, and helplessness. This was a moment she had meticulously planned, and yet it had been undermined before it could even begin. And, ever vigilant and precise, reportedly knew of the letter's existence. Whether she orchestrated its interception or simply observed its misdirection is a matter of speculation. But what is clear is that Anne's influence within the palace allowed her to control the flow of information in ways that reinforced her strategic objectives. By ensuring that Meghan's plea never reached the Queen and effectively removed one potential avenue of recognition and influence, further cementing Catherine's position as the favored recipient of the coveted title. The letter also highlighted Meghan's growing reliance on formal channels and direct appeals, a method that contrasted sharply with Catherine's subtle, patient accumulation of trust and influence. Where Meghan sought to assert herself through written advocacy and carefully staged initiatives, Catherine's influence was earned quietly, through consistency, discretion, and personal relationships. Anne's oversight, whether intentional or incidental, exposed the vulnerabilities in Meghan's approach and underscored the limits of visibility-based influence within the monarchy. The contents of the letter, as reported by insiders, reveal a mix of ambition and earnestness. Meghan outlined her charitable initiatives, her global advocacy, and her vision for expanding the royal family's engagement with the public. She framed her request not as a demand but as a demonstration of capability, hoping to align her achievements with the values and expectations of the monarchy. Yet, despite the thoroughness and sophistication of her argument, the letter was effectively neutralized before it could achieve its purpose. What's fascinating is the emotional complexity surrounding this moment. Meghan's frustration was compounded by the knowledge that she had been meticulous, strategic, and sincere. Yet all her effort was undermined by forces beyond her control. This is a key insight into the monarchy. Influence is not solely about talent, ambition, or visibility. It is also about timing, alignment with tradition, and the subtle endorsement of those who wield power quietly behind the scenes. Meghan's letter, lost before reaching the Queen, is a testament to the invisible architecture of influence within the royal family. Meanwhile, Catherine's rise continued uninterrupted. The contrast could not have been clearer. Catherine's steady, patient accumulation of trust and influence was rewarded with the prestigious title